Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. It is always an exciting opportunity for me to begin recording an episode to share with you. It is, I kind of get butterflies. It still feels very new, and it's just exciting. It's exciting to put together material to do research with the goal of being informative, with the goal of presenting a competing message, an alternate narrative than that which is provided to us in mainstream media. The Black community has a certain type of content that is geared towards us, that we are targeted with, and it's comedic. It is sometimes degenerate, debasing when you look at some of the reality television shows, and it is just kind of thoughtless, mindless, uninspiring to a great extent. And so I want to present not only a competing message and alternate narrative, but just give us an opportunity to have a choice. Sure, you can, turn on the Housewives or the Basketball Wives or the hip hop, you can turn on all of that. And you can also turn on Nora Speaks, or you can put on another podcast. But what I know is that there is a vacuum of meaningful content that is targeted for us. And I think the greatest problem with that is that we just consume it so much, and we help to make people who are engaging in unproductive, dangerous behavior, damaging behavior, we help them become popular, and we don't really give a lot of thought, I don't think, to what it is that we're sitting in front of or listening to, or putting in front of our children, or listening with our children. And so with this podcast, it's for everybody. It's for families. It's for fathers and mothers to listen. You can listen to this with your children around. You can listen to this with your parents around. There's not going to be any language or content that in any way is debasing or denigrating our people. In fact, I hope that with this podcast, it helps create conversations. It helps create thought. It helps, hopefully, help us modify our behaviors, or at least think before we act, and not be so reactive or thoughtless in our behaviors. And when I say thoughtless, I mean, there are times when I'm in my community and I'll see a person just open up a package of chips or some snack cake. And once that person finishes, they just drop the trash on the ground without a thought, And so when that's happened in my community, my neighborhood, I'll say, there's a trash can. And I say, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't even thinking. And that's what I mean. We're not even thinking. We just act without thought. We and to a large extent, this is our grooming. This has been part of our conditioning. This has been some of how many of us were raised, and we have to, pull each other's coattail. We have to nudge each other to correct or productive behavior. This is not to say that everybody should act in a certain kind of way, but we certainly shouldn't condone behavior that that tears down our community. We shouldn't condone behavior that tears down one another. Behaviors that our young people are engaging in, and in the street life. We shouldn't be condoning that, and we shouldn't be encouraging them into these lifestyles, which often happens. So ultimately, my point in saying all of that is Nora Speaks is to tug at the soul and consciousness of our community, to maybe sprinkle some water, be a source of inspiration. I hope that what you found in this podcast is refreshing. I want to be a refreshing voice here for our people. And I have to say, I do this out of love. I do this out of duty. I believe that is my responsibility to share what I have learned, to be that person that is unselfish, that engages with our community far and near, and presents a message that is broad reaching and that is evergreen, meaning it's always relevant, it's always appropriate, and it's not just relegated to a certain time period, and the reason why I say that is because truth is always in season. And what I want to serve the community with, serve my people with, is a message that is truthful, that is honest, and that is, once applied, productive for our people. And so with this episode, I want to talk about language and learning, and our choosing of words, and how what we say matters sometimes more than we know. And it's really kind of taking us back to grammar school, talking about, in this episode, I'll be talking about, the subject and the object of sentences. And you may say, now, Nora, where are you going with this? Why is this appropriate? And so I want you to listen very closely. I'm going to do my best to take my time. I mean, if I was doing this and I had, markers and a whiteboard, I'm sure it would be much easier because I could write things, I could circle things, I'd have arrows to point to. But I'm really going to take my time and construct this message in a way so that it is as understandable and clear as possible. And if you recall learning sentence structure in elementary school, your teacher had a chalkboard, depending on your age. Maybe your teacher had a whiteboard, or maybe your teacher had a smart board, depending on the age of the listener. But and so that's why I say I'm going to take my time, because I want you to imagine exactly what I'm saying. So, in a sentence, there is the subject, there is the predicate, right? So the subject is the actor, and the predicate is the second part of the sentence, usually containing a verb or a phrase or an object. So a sentence can be just two words. For example, I'm going to use this example. Teachers teach. Teachers teach, right? So the subject, teachers. The verb, teach, right? And that's a complete sentence. You have the subject, you have the verb, you have the subject, and you have the predicate. You have the action, the subject, which is the teacher or the teachers. Their action, the verb, teach. Teachers teach. And so we're going to expand this, and we're going to add an object, okay? Teachers teach students. Teachers teach students. So the subject is teachers. The action, the verb, teach. The object, students. So what is an object? An object is that part of the sentence that is being acted upon. So we know what the teachers are doing. They teach. The students are being taught by the teachers. They're being acted upon. So in this case, you are understanding exactly what's happening, right? The teachers are teaching the students. And it's important for us to have complete and full sentences, because we could just say teachers teach. Well, who are the teachers teaching? Are they teaching parents? Or are they teaching other teachers? Are they teaching dogs? Are they training dogs, right? So in this sentence, teachers teach students, you get a full picture, right? You know what's happening. You know who is doing the acting, and you know who is being acted upon. Teachers teach students. Now, I want to say that when we are talking about American history, when we're talking about the legacy in this country, we don't often speak about it in a full context. There's usually something missing. There's sometimes questions that are left, or we just get part of the picture, and that part of the picture is the only part that we're focusing on, right? So going back, the students in that sentence, they're being taught. We know who's teaching those students. It's not firemen, right? It's not the parents of the students. It's not a computer program that's teaching students. It's the teacher teaching students, because I said teachers teach students. And so now let's consider how we talk about American history, specifically when we are talking about Black history in America, which is unfortunately a separate part of the historical learning in schools, and often a very neglected part of history, right? I believe that Black history is American history, and we're talking about Black history in America. It's American history, and we're talking about American slavery, when we're talking about civil rights movement, we're talking about segregation. That's not Black history, that's American history. But when we put it in the category of Black history, it's almost as if we don't talk about Black people, that part didn't exist. If we're not talking about the history of Black people in America, that part does not exist. But it is, this history it is American history. It did occur in this country. And so we have to talk about this in a very, very full context. So just in speaking about American history, right? And we're talking about that subject, that portion called Black history. Usually the actor is excluded in the teaching of Black history. So I'll give you an example. We say, when we're talking about Black history, we say Blacks were slaves. Okay, well, that certainly is part of the history. We say Blacks were lynched. Black people were lynched. Black people fought for civil rights. And this puts Black people in the position of the subject, right? Black people fought for civil rights. The subject of that sentence is Black people. Blacks were lynched. The subject, again, are Blacks. Blacks were slaves. The subject is Blacks. And were is the verb. It refers to a state of being. So we lived in a condition. Our being was slaves. We were in a condition of being lynched. And so the emphasis is placed on the object that was acted upon, right? Now remember, in the earlier sentence, teachers teach students. The students were being acted upon by the teachers. They were being taught. However, when we say Blacks were lynched, it puts Black people in the subject almost as if we are the actor, but we were not the actor. We are the object of someone else's actions. So let's compare sentences. Black people fought for civil rights. Let's compare that to white people withheld civil rights. Let's compare another sentence. Black people were lynched. Let's compare that to white people lynched Black people. Let's compare one more. Black people were slaves. white people enslaved black people. So you see, when we say blacks were slaves, it puts us as the it puts us as the subject. Blacks were slaves. It puts black people as the subject and the object of our own suffering, but it does not identify the people that acted upon us. Blacks were slaves. However, when we say white people enslaved black people, we get a fuller picture. If we just say blacks were slaves, then that is that gives us very limited information, right? And it gives us just black people to focus on. It gives us the enslavement to focus on. And so for Black history, we're focusing on what's happened or what black people are doing. But it does not give us any information when we speak like that. Blacks were slaves. Blacks fought for civil rights. It does not give us information beyond what's happening with black people, what black people are doing. But when we say white people withheld civil rights, well, now we know why black people were fighting for civil rights, because the civil rights were being withheld from them. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. So if we're learning American history with a very limited context, with the actors unidentified, implied sometimes, or even spoken of passively, then that is not a complete picture of the history. And so not only do black people not have a complete picture of the history, but white people don't either. So when white people are listening and learning about black history, it's all about black people. However, black people have been acted upon. That's why they were slaves. That's why they were lynched. That's why they had to fight for civil rights, because there was an actor acting upon them. And so I just said that when history is taught to us, the actors are either unidentified, implied, or they're mentioned passively. And I'm going to give you an example of passive. So back to grammar school. There's something called active voice and passive voice. I'm going to give you an example of a passive voice. The slave trade was ran by whites. The slave trade was ran by whites. Now here's the active voice. Whites ran the slave trade. Whites ran the slave trade. That is me speaking of the actor in a active voice. The actor is doing something. But when we say the slave trade was ran by whites, that's the passive voice. If we say blacks were enslaved by whites, we're putting the actor in a passive position. And when we're learning history in America, often the actor is mentioned in a passive history, or in a passive sense, not an active sense, but a passive sense. We learn about that group or those people who are being acted upon. We learn about them and they're the highlight. But those who were acting upon our people, or the subject in a sentence, blacks were enslaved, then that focus again goes on black people. And this is why I say that this is a problem. It is a problem because it puts, again, as I said, it puts blacks were enslaved, or blacks were slaves, as the subject and the object of our own suffering without identifying the actor. And when the actor is not identified, then it's as if the person can get away without any culpability. The actor has no responsibility. The actor isn't even mentioned, or when the actor is mentioned, he's mentioned in a passive sense. So what's happened is that black people have unjustly inherited the burden to teach others of our own history. Now, and this is happening now with people wanting to have socially conscious conversations, and this is good. We want everybody to engage in socially conscious conversation, especially in a time such as this in America. What happens, though, is that with Caucasian people, our coworkers, our friends, those Caucasian people that we worship with, that we do recreation activities with, our neighbors. They want to engage in these conversations, which is good, but they are asking us to teach them not only of our history, but of their history, right? So they want to know, why are you feeling like this? What is your history? Teach me about your people. But if they had a thorough knowledge of their own history, they wouldn't have these questions. They'd be more informed, and maybe even empathy would be persuasive in their actions and interactions with others. So they learned that Black people were enslaved. Now, let's think about this. Who enslaved Black people? Now let's study those people. We're always studying the object that was acted upon. Let's study the actor. White people ran the transatlantic slave trade. White people lynched Black people. White people denied Black people civil rights. Now let's study the actor. When we put emphasis or even include the actor, it gives us a fuller picture and it gives us a broader context of what occurred or what's occurring. But when we exclude that, again, as I said, the focus is only on that which has been acted upon. Blacks were slaves. Now, we know that the history of this country is that whites used brutality to decimate the indigenous people that were on this continent. Americans used barbaric methods to destroy the pride, heritage, and the ambition of the Africans that they enslaved. We know that. We know that America refused to treat its ex-slaves with the dignity that is entitled to all human beings. We also know that whites humiliated, disgraced, and degraded Black men and women in the public, in front of their own children, in front of white people, in front of their own children. We know that they held picnics where they would lynch a Black person. They would choose a Black person, pick a nigger. They would picnic and have fried chicken and watermelon, and it would be a festival when they planned to hang and or shoot and burn a Black person. It was a festival. We also know that white people assaulted and killed Black people during their peaceful protests, even when the code of conduct was not to strike back in self-defense. But what do we say in America when we're talking about this history? We say Black people were enslaved. We say we were segregated. We say Black people were oppressed. We say Black people were lynched. We say Black people were redlined. We say Black people were financially exploited. So let's give more clarity. Let's provide more context. Whites financially exploited Blacks. Whites redlined Blacks. Whites lynched Blacks. Whites oppressed Blacks. Whites segregated Blacks. And whites enslaved Blacks. So, as we're having these socially conscious conversations, let's not just put a mirror up to our own experience. Let's put a mirror up to their own experience and their own actions, not just own. Let's illustrate their people's histories that led to the same issues that we're talking about today. So let's take ourselves out of the place of the subject, because we are the object and we have been acted upon. So when we put the emphasis on the actor, now we have to consider the nature of an actor who would act in such a way. Sure, we can talk about the slave was beat and that poor slave must have suffered. That poor slave must have been in pain. But let's talk about the white man beat the slave. Now, can we talk about the nature, the mindset, the thought pattern of that actor? When we say that Blacks fought for civil rights, when we say Blacks were denied civil rights, let's change that around. Whites or America denied Black people civil rights. America withheld civil rights from Black people. Now let's talk about the actor. What was the intent? What is the nature? Let's understand the type of person and personality that would act upon another person in such a way. Now let's study that. Let's put the emphasis there. As I said, when we say something like blacks were enslaved, then we just give a very small portion of the picture. When we say white people enslaved blacks, well, now we're looking at a much bigger picture. I'm seeing more of the picture that's in this frame. And so I have more to study in this picture. I have more to analyze in this picture. And so that's what I'm saying to you. As you are teaching your children history, as you're having socially conscious conversations with colleagues, classmates, teammates, neighbors, let's talk about it in the full context of the picture. Not so much where the person acted upon is the focus. Let's talk about the actor. Now, we don't have to only focus on the actor, but at this point, we're only focusing on the object that was acted upon. So let's broaden our focus and let's do a little more analyzing. And if we do more analyzing of the actor, then we'll understand how we found ourselves or find ourselves where we are today. We understand the protests. We understand the brutality. We understand the Karens, right? We understand the hatred that is levied out against Black people, understand the brutality that's levied out against Black people. You see, we have historically looked at Black people. We've studied the killing. We've studied the degradation. We've studied the struggle, right? But let's study who we had to struggle against. Let's study the systems and why that actor created such systems. Let's study the actions of the actor, the killing, the maiming, the murder, and understand or analyze the nature of such an actor. Let's paint a broader picture, right? For our children to be in school, and the first thing that they learn about themselves is that their people were slaves. Not that the forefathers of this country were slave holders. They were slave holders, and Black people at that time were being acted upon by these great men that many love so much and many revere so much. And we were being acted upon viciously because the actor was vicious. We were being acted upon with such brutality because the actor was a brute. We were being acted upon with such savagery because the actor was a savage. So let us study the actor that acted upon the object so that we can give our children and others who seek to have these conversations with us a broader picture. Because as I said, for some reason, Black people have unjustly inherited the burden to explain not just our history, as if it's not American history, but even to explain how the actions of others, forefathers, grandfathers, we have to explain their actions to their own grandchildren for them to have a broader perspective to understand the conditions even they witness that they don't understand. So let's paint a broader picture. And I hope that you have enjoyed this grammar lesson that I have shared with you. You have subject, you have a verb, and you have a sentence. You have an object of the sentence. The teachers teach students. The students were being acted upon by the teachers. Blacks were enslaved. Black people were slaves. Not only are we the subject, but we're the object. But we didn't act upon ourselves, brothers and sisters. We did not act upon ourselves. Let's talk about the actor in these stories that we're telling. Let's analyze the nature of the actors in these stories, these histories that we're telling. Let's put more emphasis on the actor and less emphasis on the object that was acted upon. I thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@neurospeaks.com. You can also follow the Neurospeaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Neurospeaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.